Hello, everybody. So, it's time for the next story. Let me say just one quick thing to head off some comments and explain the style of this one. I know I use pronouns almost exclusively and seem to be purposefully trying to be vague. That's because technically this is a prologue to a story idea I have long since abandoned. But since I liked this part of the story, I decided to keep it. Well, with those disclaimers aside, now it's time for Mirror Eyes. He paused in his busy work, standing in front of his little niche, the place he'd been given to keep the pitifully few personal effects they'd managed to salvage from his house after the fire. Slowly, without thinking, he picked up the framed photograph. One side was torn and blackened, the person on the right no longer visible, but that didn't matter. You could still see her, and that was all he cared about. He stared at the picture, unable to look away, afraid he would forget what she looked like, just as he now struggled to remember her sweet voice. Some people who looked at the photo without ever having met her would have said she was merely pretty. Her skin was a tad too pale for all the current trends, and worse, it had a few freckles and acne spots, making it far from the flawless surface pushed by the modern media. Her nose seemed a tad too large for her face. Her eyes, ice blue in the picture, were set a fraction too widely apart. Her hair, an unusual blend of brown, black, and blonde, was just growing out of the layer she'd had it cut into, and was escaping from a low ponytail in frizzy, straggly strands. They would have thought her just too plain, too ordinary to be considered attractive. But he knew her. He looked at the photo, which had captured her mid-laugh, and he remembered the way her eyes would shift color from darkest blue to almost silver, depending on her mood. He remembered the dimple she had that was so pronounced it would appear even when she glared. He remembered the warmth of her embrace, the music of her laugh, and the brilliant joy of her smile. He didn't care what anybody else thought. To him, there was and would always be only one word to describe her: beautiful. His grip on the photo tightened as he remembered the last time he'd seen her. Her face streaked with dirt and tears, her body taut with fear, her expression a picture of anguished concern, absolute terror, and heartbreak. And he remembered her fate, and the hand he'd had in it. "I'm sorry," he whispered in a voice choked with grief. "I am so sorry." The days weren't so bad. Most days she was so busy trying to stay alive she didn't have time to think about anything else. It was the nights that got to her, because once she stopped running, her thoughts caught up with her, forcing her to remember him. On the good days, she could remember the happy times, those days at school before their world was turned upside down and invaded by enemies that she mentally compared to the denizens of hell. On those nights, she'd picture him laughing at one of the ridiculous rabbit trails their study group constantly traipsed down, or he'd be strolling by her side as they meandered around campus, trying to relax before midterms, or she'd see him behind the keyboard, singing whatever song was currently his favorite, his face alight with an expressiveness he could never contain. His black hair would have fallen into his eyes if he'd let it, but he chose instead to style it up in his own unique way. His hazel eyes, slanted in an odd juxtaposition that spoke of mixed ethnical heritage, always sparked with humor and life. He wasn't much taller than she was, but she could never think of him as small. She remembered the feeling of his hand in hers, the thrill she felt when she could make him laugh, and the passion for music that had first brought them together. Other nights, she was not so fortunate. Other nights, she remembered him as she'd last seen him, doubled over in pain, splattered with the grime of battle, trying to stay strong for her sake, but his eyes filled with pain and fear. And she remembered leaving him there, leaving him to die. Her slight frame was racked with sobs, until she could contain it within no more. "I'm sorry," she choked out. "I didn't want to. I'm so sorry." That's all for this video. Thank you for your patience. Want to know some of the background information on this story or see the text version? In the description, I have the link to where it's posted on my DeviantArt profile, so head on over and read on. If you enjoyed it, please like, share, subscribe, and please check out some of my other videos as well. Saw something I can improve on for next time? Or something good you think I should keep doing? Let me know in the comments below.